Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I'm your host, Chris Gargano, and I lied. It's not just any other episode. It's episode 75. And for that, we thank you for being part of this each and every week. I know you're getting value from these conversations, from these tremendous guests. So thank you for recommending the podcast to your family, friends, and coworkers. Thanks for writing reviews and making this podcast what it is. It's only getting bigger because of you and because of guests like the one we have today, Marie-Hélène Pelletier. She is an author of the popular book released in February called The Resilience Plan. What is that? She will describe it in detail. A pillar-oriented strategy to make you more resilient, combining your values personally into your profession to enable you to come into work to deal with adversity, because we all have it. This conversation is rich. She is a practicing work psychologist and trusted leader in clinical counseling and workplace psychology. She has both a PhD in psychology and an MBA. She brings the latest research and proven best practices to her talks, inspiring participants to take action and get results. The conversation begins now with Marie-Hélène Pelletier. All right, MH, it's wonderful to see you. You have the book over your shoulder. It came out in February. So let me start there. What has been the response to your book in the few months that it's been out?
It's amazing. It's way more fun than you think. You know it's work, you're doing it for a purpose, you're hoping it meets this purpose, and then but reception, it goes from every word helped to like, is she in my head? She completely gets it, to I'm buying this for my team. And then I've got organizers at conferences saying, okay, we're elevating the gift bag and this book's going in it. And so it's fantastic. That's what every author would want, right? We're writing books for reasons, to reach our readers and share that message. So so more to come on this, but so far it's amazing.
And you deserve it. Okay, so let's dive in. So resiliency. So many leaders, and I've listened to interviews that you've done, the book itself, but many leaders think, I am resilient. I have achieved a certain amount of success, but it starts to, at some point in our lives, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it starts to not deteriorate, but it starts to need attention. Is that the genesis? Can we start there, like helping people that might not necessarily know they need help?
Yes. It needs attention. It needs to be nourished. And here's one thing. In general, we all think in human development, even if we're not psychologists, we think, well, children, adolescents, adults. That's it. Turns out, and people who are in this field know this, but most people don't, within the adult life, there are adult stages of development as well. Life in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on, does not look the same. The level of demands is different. The age we have, the ways in which our brain can tolerate demands changes also over time. And so the overall context was one thing, and the overall context we're in now is different. But sometimes we base our decisions on what to do and what we need on old data. And so the context is different. We need to change it. And so that's part of what happens. And yes, there's also that discourse of, wow, Chris, you're so good. You've gone through so many things. You're inherently resilient. That's who you are as a person. You start incorporating this in your identity. But yet we know resilience is not a personality trait. It's a state. So we can actually and need to nourish it, to keep it as high as possible. So we can go through all these demands, many of which we actually love. They're great challenges, but we need help to go through them.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great point that you're making now. So MH, let's look at this. How, and I have it here in case you don't have it off the top of your head, but from your book, how do you define resilience? So let's have a level set. How do you define the term, the concept, sometimes the emotion of resiliency?
I know. And it actually is a very important question. Also, because even when we look at the academic literature, there is different definitions there too. So, so what are we talking about? So the one I'm using is the one a larger portion of people are using. Our ability to go through adversity and come out even stronger. So come out stronger. So therefore, we're growing. There's that growth mindset, that learning element to it. And the going through adversity, a key piece is often we think of adversity where we need resilience as something acute, big thing happening right now. True. And there's usually also what I call chronic demands. So they're usually less intense, but they're there and they're there over a long period of time. And they're usually in addition to the acute ones, which means we're dealing with more than we actually even realize.
So, MH, throughout the book, you come back to the word custom. It has to be your plan. So, it basically, what it is to deal with adversity as you just described. When something hits you like on a Tuesday afternoon, and that's a crisis situation, but you're saying there's micro adversities, there's small times. You need a plan. Describe how does someone arrive at that plan? Now, I know that's a detail, that's your whole book and your speaking and your conferences and such, but can you give us a framework about how to get there?
Yes. And because a lot of your listeners are either leaders now, aspiring leaders, there are people who will at some point be in a situation where they will likely design a strategic plan for what they're doing. A new service offering, a new product in their own company or an employer that they work for. And I'm going to go there first as an analogy because you'll see that the parallel for what I'm saying we need to do here as individuals. But in a business, when we have a great idea, we don't just go and launch it. We would have a great idea and then explore the context. Who else is offering this? How much are they charging for it? Who's buying it? What forces, may at some point impact it? We're looking at the overall context. Once we have this, then we design the strategy, and it will be specific to this particular offering in this particular context with our goals. So same thing here. We can't just say, oh yeah, resilience, that's great. I get it. I need to increase it, but I don't have time right now. And plus, I'm like this already. Problem. None of this is true. But if we then take a moment to say, okay, I do want that goal of increasing my resilience, increasing my baseline, so to speak. Then what I need to do is do that same process of looking more specifically about my current context. What I've done in the book is extract some key pieces because I know no one has a lot of time for me on this, but we need it. So go to your values first, the same way that in a business, we would say, what's our mission? Let's go back to this and make sure we align the new offering with who we are. Same thing here. What's my values? Write them down so that you have them in front of you, not just in your head. Then we're exploring the kinds of demands you're facing, the kinds of sources of supply of energy you have. And I could talk about this a bit longer because it's a very important piece. We often, especially in leadership roles, tend to minimize the demands we're facing and lie to ourselves and actually believe we have more sources of supply than we actually do. And that creates a disconnect. So that's important. And then, yes, I do encourage people to do a personal SWOT analysis so that with this, then yes, you can identify your pillars, your strategic pillars, your actions, the equivalent of tactics in a business context, so that you know what to do. But they're all going to be very realistic, and yours, Chris, will be different from mine. And yours and mine at this point will be different than in 3 or 6 months from now.
Okay, so MH, you go into companies all the time. You talk to senior leaders and you start the process with them. So let's go back to your first pillar, people knowing their values and what they stand for as a person and as a leader. You make great distinctions in the book that we're one person. You don't just all of it, and I talk about this all the time, and so do other guests, that you don't just come on into the building or whatever the case remote and then just all right, I'm the leader now, and hold on, I don't have any children problems or my flat tire or there's other issues in my life. Those just go away. So there's that confluence of complexities of being a human being. So that first pillar you talked about, knowing one's values. How many leaders and clients that you work with know their values and can just go boom, here's what they are?
Depends on the group, the context. Are they working with an executive coach right now, or have they done their own sort of personal work, even that kind of thing? How much do they read about this and do the exercises? It depends on a number of things. I'm going to just say from my experience, about a third at the most. Um, and the more, uh, I mean, inevitably, when you're in even more senior roles, things have forced you at some point to explore these values or write them down, whether you paid attention that much or not, but you did write them down just because sometimes you had to. Um, so about yeah, I would say about that percentage. And sometimes it's in part, yes, the structures around you that have reminded you of, yeah, let's do this right now. But a lot of the time, the focus of leaders is on other people, their teams, what we're doing. And it's in part because we're wanting to serve the teams around us. It's a bit in part because we tell ourselves we don't need it that much. I'm fine. I come last, all these things. And so that means we're more focused here. And then, of course, back to life stages, as this increases and demands on the home side increase at times, what will then happen is now we have even more people to think about that we want to think about, but we do. And therefore, by default, we're not even in the equation. It's either the people at work we're supporting, the people at home we're supporting, or in our personal life generally. And very often, the leader, that person in the end, is not even on the list. It's this: I'm thinking about these people, I'm thinking about these people, and that's where my focus is.
But MH, isn't that a good thing? Isn't that servant leadership? Or does it, that's what you're talking about, is if you do it too much, you're probably not going to be in a good mental health state. You're probably neglecting self-care. You're probably not taking care of yourself as a leader. It's that old saying, when you're in an airplane, put your oxygen mask on first so you can help others. Is it kind of that concept?
It is one, and sometimes it's as if, as leaders, we think that taking the time to put that oxygen mask first will take 20 hours, and we don't have time for this. Like, we really need to be focused on the urgency or the level, the intensity of needs here. And that's a bit of that piece where I say, no, truly, it will take you a few seconds, and then you can do this. So of course, yes, as a leader, your main focus is not internal. Your main focus is on the work you're doing, the people with you that are doing it. And yes, that's where your main focus is. And you still need to pay a bit of attention to your own strategic resilience plan so that you can be that great individual. So that focus, I'm not saying now we're needing to shift all the ways in which you've been thinking by 80%. No, that's probably a 3% shift, but it's a 3% that will bring your best to what you do and allow you to sustain it as even more demands come. Way better. Not a big investment, majorly impactful.
Okay, so is it safe to say you are unable to have a custom resiliency plan if you're not able to work on yourself, right? How could you develop a resiliency plan if you don't know your values, if you don't know, if you're not taking care of yourself? Is that hypothesis, as I qualified it, accurate? Am I going somewhere with this? Or do you see what I'm saying? Like, in other words, to have a resiliency plan, you got to do some work first.
You do. And it's not a lot of work, but it is some. You just need to pay attention to it again. So it does not take a lot of time, but you do need to pay attention. The same way that here in a business strategic plan, you're not going to have a great strategic plan if you're not looking at the particular context for that new offering or product.
So, MH, you brought up something in the book that I really found is interesting, which is you say that HR departments within organizations focus more on the overall strategy and workflow, right? The totality of the employees, right? There's 300 employees. We have to focus on how the systems are working, etc. And there is focus on individuals, but and I don't want to assume, but I want you to phrase it the way that you're comfortable. You wish perhaps that it was a little bit more balanced. Is that safe to say?
We do need to pay attention to your individual psychological health and the organization's HR function. This is not their focus. This is a business. Their focus is on, yes, the individuals within the organization for the purpose of this business. It's logical. That really truly is. And that's in part sometimes when I say we should not talk about our teams or organizations as a family. It's not. It's a different structure. It can be healthy, engaging, supporting, all these beautiful things. And It's a business. So that's where HR is focused, and that's perfect. That's where they need to be. And they couldn't possibly understand each of the 300 people here, their goals, where they're at, their overall personal and professional context. It's impossible, and it's not their job. So what we want to do as individuals is, yeah, take some of what's there and that's useful for us. Fantastic. And take that leadership here. I am the leader of my own customized strategic resilience plan. And if I lead this, then I've got an even better chance at successful implementation.
So this is all on us, MH. That's very interesting.
Slightly modify this, I would say we definitely have agency. It is not all on us either, because the workplace is a system. So we're here as individuals, we're within a team. The team has a leader, the overall organization has leaders, a culture. So that is a system. So we do have agency and we want to take it. And realistically, again, we want to make sure we recognize that we're within this system. And at times it will mean that as I increase and optimize my own resilience, I may realize that this overall context here is not right for me. And I may need to go. Right. So, because even if I say do all the things, 100% of them, if the overall work context is absolutely not aligned with my values, not healthy, toxic in some ways, whatever, then it doesn't matter that I've done all these things. It still will drag me down because this is a system and I'm in it.
What a fascinating point there. So what you're saying is you could take advantage of all the resources available at your work. You can have an executive coach. You could be mindful. You could be a meditator. You could journal all day. You could be as healthy, mental health wise and physically. You have a great diet. Everything is in place, but still you walk into that place of business, and it just doesn't fit.
Yep.
That is
Yeah.
insightful. How often does that come up in your work, MH, where you have to tell the person, hey, you've done everything. I'm proud of you, or whatever the phraseology that you use. You might just need to leave.
Yeah. 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 No, that happens. And that happens. And even sometimes, actually, I've also had individuals come in and say, MH, I already know that my work context is 100% toxic, unhealthy, not right for me, and I need to stay in it. Help me. And then part of my job is to say, can't take that mandate. We can talk about this situation and where you're at, how you got there, and what may need to happen next. But that happens. It's as if in the spirit of, I can do anything. I'm a rock. I'm a leader. I've gone through all these things and I can do it as many times as I want moving forward. It's almost like we get to a point where we believe that we are immune to our psychological health ever being impacted, um, and believe that we can, in some ways, override any possible health impact. Like, if I put my head down and I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And so that's how sometimes people will go from saying, I'm the rock, and now I'm the wreck, because this thinking that in some ways is a bit we don't mean it this way, but it's rigid. It's like binary. It's black or white. It's 0 1, right? And that's not how we as humans function. As we carry on and keep going with these very high demands, many of times that we actually want, they're fantastic and all this, but sometimes some are challenging. Want it or not, at some point it gets in you, want it or not, and you're sliding down. And so it is very important to pay attention to what happens there.
And there's so many articles lately, right? Maybe it's because of AI and the tech layoffs, and there's so much going on in society that backs up your point right there, that changes are happening. Changes are happening in business. How are we going to deal with it? And this goes back to the pillars that you're establishing for the resiliency plan, and people thinking that they're already resilient. But your quote there, I am the rock, now I am the wreck. In your experience, MH, how quickly can that happen where the people do turn into a wreck? It accumulates, and then one day they wake up and unfortunately they're just not feeling good.
Yeah. The reality, this functions very much like financial statements. Right? So what happens if I take this analogy is if we are looking at our financial statements on a regular basis, we're looking to the little variations, to the little changes, the little trends, and we dive into them and make sure we understand them and make adjustments, then we're unlikely going to find ourselves in a very intensely negative financial situation. If we instead say, you know what, my financial statements are there, they're great. I know I'm in great financial shape. Let me know if we're in bankruptcy. Then that's what will happen. You're going to think you're fantastic. It will, yeah, there will be indicators, but you're not looking. And then you're going to be getting a call from the bank, right? So it's similar here for our resilience. If all we do is assume that we're at the top, that's where we are, it's inherent to us, and that's it, and we just focus on everybody else, and that's it, then that's when we're at risk of just one day realizing we're here. The amount of time varies. It depends on the intensity of the demands, how on our knees we were getting in a difficult context already at the beginning. It depends on many things. But the point is, it feels sudden to the individual because they have not looked at what's going on in between, just like not looking at the financial statements. So we just want to check in. It's not taking forever. Often a strategy, I say, look, if you don't tend to check in with yourself, and yeah, you're that type, you may actually just be thinking you're the rock right now. Then I would say, number one, give up that word. You're not a rock, you're human. So, okay. Print a calendar from the internet, post it at a place that you visit every night, where you brush your teeth before going to bed, perhaps. And every night, 0 to 10 scale, just write how well you were feeling today. 9.5, 9, 9.5, 9.7, whatever. And then keep going day after day. It will take you 2 seconds, not very long. But then you may see 8, 7.5, 7, 6.5. It will force you to see it earlier, sooner.
I love that checklist. So you brush your teeth at night. How was I today in listening? How was I today in being empathetic and things of that nature? I was a 6.2. Okay. So let's dissect that if we could, because I find it interesting. So you've given somebody, a leader, their pillars, their plan, their strategic resiliency plan. They're ready to go. They're keeping track of their behaviors. Okay, but so let's look at this. You've got I love that quote again, the rock and the wreck. So let's say they're a rock, and they're starting to not feel good, and their ratings by their where they're brushing their teeth every night are going down and down and down. What behaviors that you've seen leaders on a daily basis, what are those behaviors that have them not where they want to be, and they're starting to get closer and closer to feeling like a wreck?
Yes. So varies, different context. I'll give you examples. Often part of what we know from research will increase our resilience in general. There are top 4, and there is even more than this, but top 4, and not in that order necessarily, but one is exercise, 3 types: cardio, strength training, and meditative type activity like meditation or yoga. Your nutrition, your sleep, 7 to 8 hours, and your time spending with people that you enjoy spending time with. Okay. You don't need to put your heart on the table, but just enjoying time with people you enjoy spending time with. And then there are others: time in nature, volunteer work. There's many other things. So sometimes, as people notice that their numbers are going down, the first piece is looking at what happened. And often there's a combination of more demands happening, them not maintaining some form of boundaries. And then, of course, as that happens, well, yeah, whatever time on the bike or walk or run you were doing is gone. And whatever meditation you were doing is not happening, has not been happening. You don't even remember how to. And so that sort of now we're creating a disconnect that's even larger. And so that's often how that's an example of how we'll realize we're sliding.
So you're an advocate, and you say it in the book as well, for continuous learning and constant gaining of information. Like you even use the term wing it at times. And I say that a lot, MH, in my work as well. As like, as a leader, no matter what level you are, you can't just go in and try to experiment. You have to study this. This is a skill. And I always get a little preachy and a little bullheaded about it, but I believe so much in that just learn a little bit. Take some time, 20% of your day, 10% of your day, to just refine the way you think about things and have other perspectives with books on the shelves or podcasts or mentors, whatever the case may be. And I don't mean to sound preachy, but I'm trying to take advantage of our time together. I know you agree with it, but describe it in your words, because you'll be much more eloquent than I just was.
Yeah, the way you said it is exactly how it happens, because as leaders, you so often need to make lots of decisions all day, every day. And sometimes it just feels you need to listen to your gut and do your best with what you've got in that moment. At the same time, yes, we also need these moments where we step back and we're able to plan ahead, think, nourish how we're going to approach our roles as leaders. And one of the great concepts is to really think of it as our learning agility. It's been shown in research how leaders who are even more successful are agile in their learning. And that means learning different things from your own mental health. How can you nourish it even more? Like through resilience. Could be being more agile with how you are with people. Are you perhaps making assumptions about your team members and you could ask more questions instead of just assuming? Can you be more agile with change, welcoming it even more? Can you be even more agile and paying attention in your self-awareness, which connects very much with emotional intelligence, which we know we can probably all improve on. So these are ways, but yes, learning absolutely key, and an element of being deliberate about it.
All right, before we get to all-star moments, where we have rapid fire questions at the end here, I want to touch on something that I think is underrated in leadership and business in general. And you have it highlighted on your website as one of your signature principles, which is levity and good humor. And
Mhm.
you write this: serious subject matter calls for well-researched content and is better received with a suitable serving of lightheartedness. I think that's tremendous. Laughing and levity and lightheartedness, joy, is so powerful to comprehend and to take the air out of the pressure of a crisis situation or a giant project that we all have to tackle together. Fair?
Yes, yes, yes. Because I mean, the other reality is that if we're just thinking we're going to approach a challenging topic from a serious, problematic, negative perspectives, it's not going to be too attractive. We're not going to feel like doing it. And a lot of the work that I do is, yeah, speaking to groups and organizations that are coming together for also a good experience. Yet they do need to talk about important topics. So if we're able to bring the two together, important topic, yes, and done in a way that allows us to feel empowered, feel like I have agency on this. I actually got a tip from MH that I can actually use getting out of this room. So I'm leaving with something that I know I have power over, which who doesn't love that? And so that's, I think, what makes it just useful.
Absolutely. All right, MH, let's go. All-star round. Here we go, and then we'll let you go. How do you deal with adversity?
I do a strategic plan, but well, no, but immediate. Let's say it's immediate reaction. The deep breathing, which you'll connect to even more if you've practiced with, say, meditation. But the deep breathing is the fastest way to tell your brain to calm down.
2, how do you give yourself fuel?
Very fast walking, cardio level walking. Used to be a runner, but now can't.
Nice. 3, never give up. What does that mean to you?
Never give up on you, I would say. So sometimes you may actually give up something, but because you're not giving up on you.
I have to say this. That's the best answer I've received in a year and a half of doing this podcast. That was the best answer we've had on that.
We love being competitive. Yeah.
And I love all my other guests, but I have to be honest. Never give up on you. That's
I know, right?
awesome. Oh my gosh, that was wonderful. Okay, number 4, the value of collaboration. How important is it?
Gold.
Number 5, hiring people. What makes a great candidate?
They have the qualification. Uh, they want this job, and you want to work with them.
Describe yourself as a leader in one sentence.
I value your contribution.
And lastly, what's the difference between a manager and a leader?
Inspiration.
Wow. MH, great job. This was the whole conversation was wonderful. You just delivered today. This is so wonderful. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And we thank MH very much for being on the show. I have 3 takeaways from this conversation. Number 1, leaders, be mindful to not give too much of yourself. Yes, it's servant leadership, but you have to create boundaries, as MH said, to make sure that you can remain resilient and remain dedicated to your resiliency plan. Remember what she said, I am the rock, but now I am a wreck. We want to avoid that. Number 2, that checklist when you're brushing your teeth at night. How are you doing in different categories of your resiliency plan? Are you listening? Are you making time for yourself? Whatever your checklist is, do it. Maybe it's not where you're brushing your teeth. Maybe it's where you're watching TV, whatever. But you heard MH. It's important to check in with yourself. And the third and final takeaway was fascinating. During the all-star round, we asked MH, like we ask all of our guests, what does never give up mean to you? And she said, never give up on you. Just let that sink in. She took it another direction, and I thought that was fascinating, useful, and worthy of a takeaway, of course. Thank you very much to MH, and thank you to you each and every week for being part of Keep the Line Moving. Have a great week, everybody. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.